Welcome back to the affirmation section of today's episode of 1320 Time Stream on the White Cosmic Wind. Okay, I endure in order to communicate, transcending breath. I seal the input of spirit with the cosmic tone of presence, and I am guided by the power of death. I endure in order to communicate. That's kind of what I was beginning to cover earlier in the wave spell section. That communication will happen as the endurance kind of level is passed, or that like initiation is triggered. I endure in order to communicate. This could say what really comes up for me around that, like the very honest, simple truth of that is like there may be something that needs to communicate, but it just can't happen. There's no opening for it. There's no alignment. But as you don't shy away, that feeling of needing to communicate or whatever that is today wants to happen today and not tomorrow. But you may be getting tired. The vibe may be changing, and so you may be running out of that energy to do it. But endure. Keep it going, right? And that opening will occur. Another aspect is like it's almost like the very nature of endurance. Like let's say it's like a loading bar on the computer or like a download. It's like, okay, that's going to take you like half a day to complete the download. And so this is almost like I'm using the analogy of like transmitting and receiving like information to another person because we're using the analogy of communication. And so in this respect, it's as you endure, as you continue staying stable with that energy that is attempting to be communicated, eventually, that critical threshold is reached where the communication gets through. Right? I endure in order to communicate. And so there's just different levels of how that fundamentality exists. And to be honest, I feel it's actually very abstract because the energy of endurance is such a multifaceted phenomenology, and especially around communication. And those are the ones that really come up for me in I endure in order to communicate. Transcending breath. Now, this is very interesting because it could be considered as as the next part and also something completely on its own. The transcending breath brings me to I endure in order to communicate. It's like this endurance, this intentionalism almost. There's like the power of intent, the power of alignment, that endurance in order to communicate may even go beyond breath. It's in like a telepathic or emotional communication may begin to occur because one may want to very strongly communicate something only to get a message across to the point where breath itself has to be transcended or not has to be but becomes transcended simply because the communication reaches a different level and one had to endure in order to actually get that, right? I endure in order to communicate, and once that communication is reached, that transcends breath, right? I endure in order to communicate, transcending breath. Communicate, transcending breath, right? Another aspect of it is like a breath which is transcendental. And so this, again, always with the wind, will bring me into breath work, right? And so this is like the enduring breath work. It's about lasting. It's about going the distance. The transcending breath. It's like the breath that allows one to transcend, right? So this is another aspect that comes up for me when looking at this. I seal the input of spirit with the cosmic tone of presence. Now, this kind of it really allows me to go back to that first part, which is like I endure in order to communicate, transcending breath, almost like that telepathic or emotional or direct communication, where the transcending breath kind of phrase is really speaking of overcoming speech. And so we're going into a more direct level. And so I seal the input of spirit. It's like your spirit is directly being inputted into that communication. Your spirit itself, which we talked about earlier, which is essentially truth, right? So this endurance is actually kind of like the enduring truth. What is the truth of your soul, right? That gets inputted with the cosmic tone of presence. So I endure in order to communicate, transcending breath. I seal the input of spirit, that truth, that soul of what it is, with the cosmic tone of presence as you sustain being present. Now, I find it really unique. I'm guided by the power of death. Obviously, that's the world bridger. But I feel what really speaks to me here around this nature of direct communication is that power of death is like, as we continue showing up with that presence, as we continue enduring And that endurance is like, it's a recognition that certain things fall away, right? So if you're enduring, that's because you're meeting little walls, miniature walls. And you're like, okay, you have to endure because there's little impacts that are wanting you to quit. And so you're enduring that. Okay, you're enduring, and because endure is endurance, right? And endurance represents like stamina or lasting. And so this is the communication of endurance, right? And that's being, that spirit energy is being transmitted, but those dialects, those ways of speaking, those are affected by that death. I'm guided by the power of death. And so there may be aspects of the communication that are dying, that are falling away. And this is what is inspiring that spirit, that the presence of that spirit to become direct, because it's finding a direct way through. And so that endurance is, again, guided by the power of death, that endurance is factored by that power of death, because that endurance energy is representing that you're letting go of something. That there's aspects or flecks or feathers or hairs of this particular type of experience you're having that are needing to be let go, or are just simply being let go as this communication occurs. So I endure in order to communicate transcending breath. I seal the input of spirit with the cosmic tone of presence, and I am guided by the power of death. Okay, it feels like we pretty much summed up the affirmation energy. Stay tuned for the oracle.